So today we're going to talk about the transforming the SharePoint full source code solutions to the Office or SharePoint app model. To be honest, it's actually called add-ins.
Add-ins.
The marketing people are changing the term all the time. We don't know. It's probably add-ins today. We'll wait what it is tomorrow. I'm not from marketing, so I'm making bad jokes. Sorry for that. Just to introduce myself before we do the introductions for all of the other ones, if we actually, let's go to the following slide. That's a better thing. So my name is Vesa Jumanen. I'm a senior program manager in Office 365 engineering. So I'm part of the bad guys from Microsoft. I'm one of those guys who are actually responsible of some of the stuff what you're actually using in the app model. I do, however, concentrate more on the Office 365 patterns and practices guidance. Essentially, we're trying to help you and provide you the guidance to do the transformation from the farm solutions to the app model. And today, I'm going to kind of act like a host for today's session. But let's go around for the introductions and see who do we have on the stage.
Thanks. I'm Bob German. I'm a principal architect for Blue Metal Architects. I worked for Microsoft for 16 years. I wrote a book on SharePoint development, which is completely wrong now, so we're going to show you the new way to do it.
I'm Chris O'Brien. I'm an independent consultant in the UK. I have a long-standing relationship with a company there called Content & Code. I act as their head of development, team of 20 devs, busy with on-premises projects and Office 365, and we see quite a lot of different flavors of development, so we see quite a lot.
I'm Aaron van Hune. I'm a consultant from Sweden. In my free time, I work basically with Frank and Vesa and several other people in the PnP project.
And my name's Frank Marasco. I'm a principal consultant at Microsoft. I specialize, most of my time is spent in SharePoint Online. Part of the core team of PnP. Let's hear it for PnP people, right? Come on, PnP. All right, see, there's one applause. So back to you.
Thank you. So if you can go to the following slide. And do excuse me, this is my third session today, but I'm flying home right after this one. So that's the coffee. So excuse that. So what we're going to do today is that I'm going to cover four different hot topics. Essentially the branding, provisioning, a sandbox solution, and SharePoint apps versus Office 365 apps. So what we're trying to do is for all of those things, we will have demo. So there will be a discussion, a few slides, and each of these guys are going to present something, and then we will have a panel discussion about the topic. We do ask that all of the actual questions coming from audience would be the final section of the presentation. So we're planning to have some extra time in the end. And we'll be here the whole evening, except me because I need to catch a flight. But the guys will be here for the whole week as well. But we will have a discussion and hopefully hitting those questions what you are wondering related, for example, branding or, for example, provisioning or, for example, sandbox solutions. There will be demo as well. So 4 hot discussions and maybe 4 hot dudes. I don't know. Bad joke, I know. It was me. That was my joke. So let's actually start with Frank with the demo. Frank is going to start with the branding with app model, go through some of the topics, which might overlap on something what I presented, but not too much. So we'll see how it goes. Frank.
So, yeah, right now I'm going to play your video that you just, from the session prior. But so the very interesting thing, and I asked all my customers this, right? So how many of you guys actually brand Outlook and the Office client? Why would you want to do that to your SharePoint collaboration sites? I know that branding is very important to some of you, and most of the time, right, I try to talk to my customers and say, what is the return on investment of actually customizing and having custom page layouts for your team collaboration sites? It really doesn't make sense, right, if you think about it, right? This is not really a publishing portal. The thing that you want to ask yourself is, why? What is the return on investment for that? One of the things that we want to also talk about, right, is, Vesa has taught us for many years of how to write full trust code and how to deploy that. There's big debate in the community about master pages, okay? The main problem that we have with master pages is mostly related to SharePoint Online. SharePoint Online, we actually deploy updates fairly frequently, once a month actually. It's a little bit different from an on-prem world where we have CUs, every 3-4 months, right? So that impact is not as large as it would be in SharePoint Online. So some of the things, right, is when we deploy our master page through SharePoint Online, and Vesa and the Microsoft team actually goes out and pushes out a new widget, your application or your user experience, you're not going to get those nice little widgets. Perhaps we fix a bug, right? We don't have any bugs, right, in our UX, right? So we could actually introduce a new widget, a bug fix, or actually enhancements if you think about it from the video portal type experience in the next-gen portals. The other thing, too, right, is that there are different ways to actually apply your branding to your sites. The moral of the story, avoid the feature framework, okay, when you're deploying. One of the interesting challenges is one of my customers actually deployed their branding with the feature framework. They forgot to, when we were transitioning to the app model, everything was actually still broke. Once we deployed our new app model solution, we deactivated the features like we all do, right? We deactivate the features. That's what Vesa has told us. It actually removed that master page that we just deployed with the app model. So that is some of the things that you have to look out for. You know, we say that it's a content migration. What we have to do actually there is actually ensure that we deactivate our features. We then deploy our new branding assets. So maybe you have, if you do want that new master page, you deploy that, give it a different name. All your CSS files, et cetera, you give them different names that don't match your feature elements. And the key here, how many of you guys use sandbox solutions? I don't want to steal, you know, from others. I saw a hand. I saw two. I see what everyone's doing, right? I don't want to do this. They're going to yell at me, right? You know, the sandbox solutions actually have the exact same problem. You still have to understand the little SharePoint-isms with those solutions. You still, underneath the covers, it's the feature framework. Themes and master pages, right? So, yes, I use my master page. I have total control of my master page. I can do whatever I want. I can move the search box to wherever. I can actually do a lot of advanced things. I can actually control some of my web parts. The new feature comes out that we fix. And now you have to go back and enumerate all those sites and update your master page. That is the biggest challenge. Okay, you know, the themes versus alternate CSS, right? So themes is actually a good way to introduce look and feel. You want your own font? Perfect. You know, you have a font that's specific to your organization. If you have a different color red that is only for you, right? You can actually control those and deploy those out to your site. The interesting thing about themes, right? You heard Vesa talk about provider-hosted apps. Those themes are actually applied in your provider-hosted apps, right? By implementing that Chrome control. That doesn't happen with a master page, right? So I have a provider-hosted app I will not get that look and feel, right? That you have. So themes is a good way to actually be applied across the suite and even your custom apps. One of the interesting things with themes, right, is that it protects us, you know, from that future version if that master page does hit the service. So that is also something to think about. You heard Vesa talk about JavaScript embedding. That is another topic of how we can actually introduce those customizations. I don't want to repeat his presentation and bore you guys. So why don't I show you a nice little sample. So everyone complains. How many of you guys want responsive design in SharePoint? Everyone does. Sorry, Vesa. We all do, right? So right now, here's a normal team collaboration site. So just to show that I got no tricks up my sleeve. You know, that's not very responsive, right? I can't really show my iPhone right now hitting this, but you know, this is the experience that I would get. So I have a little bit of code here from Patterns and Practices that actually demonstrates in how I can apply an alternate CSS to that site, all right? I'm not going to bore you to death with tons of code, but right now this is actually using SharePoint Online credentials. If you were on premises, you would use your network credentials, or you can use app-only permissions.
Can you, Frank, slightly zoom that? I'm just thinking for the benefit of the audience in the back.
That's it. I still have to learn Zoom it a little bit better. So what I'm doing here, right, is the first thing that I want to do is I need to upload those assets, right? So in this case, it's a CSS file. And just recently, back in, April, was it April?
A year ago.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, my time, I don't even know what day it is. So we actually introduced an alternate CSS member, and what I'm going to do then is set that on the web property and then run that. So you probably want to see it work and done seeing the code, so let's just fire this off. Now, this is just a simple console application. This is another way of how you can deploy your customizations to your sites. So let's just copy my site here. Copy, paste. Type in, I love Vesa.
This is starting to be disturbing, Frank.
Well, we are close. We have worked for a long time. So, good. I didn't get any exceptions. That means my code, I'm a good developer. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to refresh. And now let's minimize. And you can now see that I slid the search box over to the other side. I got my news feed. And now I have my documents. All right? So pretty exciting, right? I can actually just do that. Oh, look at it. Second clap. Second clap. All right. Anyone pop quiz? So you saw the screen before. All right. Here it is. All right. We got the getting started web part that we all keep on our sites, right? But this is just an example. That web part is not very responsive. Okay. The web parts, there are only a few that actually work, all right, from a responsive design standpoint. Not all of our web parts are. If you really need to have a responsive web part, JavaScript embedding is going to be your answer for that, all right? But we don't want to do that on team collaboration sites, right, people? Only publishing sites, probably lose that one. So, you know, so with that said, let's go back. And now I'm going to argue with my friends. Okay.
That's a wrong screen. Yeah.
Yes.
There we go.
Thank you, Master. And actually, before everyone leaves, everyone say bye to Master because he's going home today. But one of the things, right, so leverage Office 365 themes, right? Master pages don't get carried over across the suite, right? So Exchange, you want Exchange, that, and you want that sweep bar. Everyone saw that sweep bar, right? That could be applied across the suite, applied across Yammer. Leverage themes where all possible, right? Alternate CSS and images. I'm going to ask, where would I want to store my images, guys? Right? So I got my assets, right? Do I dump them into a site assets library? Right? How many of you guys say site assets? Maybe. Right? Where's a better place where I can store my site assets?
You could use a shared site.
A shared site. What about a CDN? Wouldn't a CDN be better? What happens if I have a blob cache enabled, right?
Yep, CDN's a good call, especially if you've got lots of new users coming from different parts of the world. They won't have the images cached already. Yep.
Yep. So one of the interesting things that we have actually seen in some of our customers is that, you know, they're in their web app, okay? They enable blob cache, right? And I see her laughing right over here. They enable blob cache. Now they change their assets. Guess what just happened? Not only is it cached in the browser, it's also cached by the blob cache. So eventually that will get changed. So if you change your assets very quickly, right, you know, maybe once a month or weekly, you know, branding changes every day, right? You know, that is also a pain point that you can also experience. So placing those out of, you can store them in SharePoint, but just be conscious of how you do that, right? Because you might actually run into that issue.
just throwing it out there for the discussions on the other things. So Chris, let's start with you on the kind of opinions on what Frank is actually saying. So what about the custom master pages? What's your take on what he's actually saying?
So I guess, I see things a little bit differently, and I've sort of said this sort of on my blog and in the past that I get the idea of not using custom master pages for lots of things in Office 365. And for collaboration and team sites, I get that message. I think it makes sense. We get asked to develop intranets on Office 365. That's a really common request for us. And our clients come to us with deep requirements around the user experience and deep branding. And here, there is no using Seattle.master to get that experience that the client is asking for. And I just think that in these cases, you do need a custom master page. And, Frank makes the point that if a change to an Office 365 master page comes, you're going to need to recode that in your master page. But that's okay for our clients. They accept that. They accept that customization tax. And, we think it's still a valid scenario. So it's not everything where you can say, don't use a custom master page in Office 365. I think that's a too simplistic way of looking at things.
There's a third one. Actually, just don't deploy with the sandbox and the feature framework. How about that, right?
So, and absolutely, I just want to make it really clear for those who were in the branding session yesterday, we had a rerun this morning. We're not actually saying that the custom master pages are wrong. We're saying that you have to take that decision knowingly that you will create a custom master page, and then you take that maintenance task, like Chris was saying. We absolutely support custom master pages within the SharePoint into online. So it's a decision what we make, and then we go to the direction. What Frank was essentially pointing out is that the minimal maintenance cost in the longer run. So let's be clear on that one.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate, I'll agree with what Chris said, and I'll try to answer the question of why, if you don't brand Word or Outlook, why do you want to brand your team sites? The answer is because it's a website, and people expect websites to be branded. But I think that I like what you showed technically, and I think that it's the right direction because there's ways other than master pages that you can get the results that you want. And so there's kind of a continuum of how flexible do you want to be. And the more flexible with the master page, the bigger the tax. You can just consider it an ongoing cost.
It's a little issue I have with branding, actually. If you, if you brand Office 365, if you deploy the whole package, so you deploy Outlook, you deploy all the web apps and everything, it's a very disconnected experience. So you have the SharePoint sites, they might look wonderful, you have your own themes there and everything, and your own master page, and then you click on the Outlook and you go to Outlook and it looks completely different. So the integration is gone there. And so that's why I personally don't like branding that much.
And that is a good point. But what we see is clients trying to take cues from the Office 365 suite into their branding of their custom intranet. And you end up with a nice balance potentially. So navigating across the Office 365 suite, going from Delve to Yammer to SharePoint sites, you'll take some cues into your customized area of SharePoint. And what's really common for our clients is they end up with almost like two arms or two types of SharePoint sites. We end up with the highly branded intranet, and that's publishing oriented, and we end up with collaboration sites. And what we've done is, minimal branding with just themes and composed looks on the collaboration side, but we've still got this publishing oriented intranet side, which is more highly branded, but even that branding is taking some cues from the overall Office 365 branding.
Good, and that absolutely makes sense, and that's what we see with some of the enterprises as well. We just really want to make sure that people understand that it's a decision, that there are multiple different options to do the branding. We just shouldn't jump on the custom master page immediately as the default option. That's what we want to essentially say. So let's actually move on the things. Sorry, Frank, just being conscious about the time. And let's let Irvin to actually explain what is a remote provision. And we're going to do actually a really cool demo on this one, which haven't been seen in the conference or in the conference podium before. It's going to be relatively fast, but I'll let Irvin to do that.
Right. So you build all these customizations. You've been thinking about themes. You've been thinking about lists that you want to be deployed to sites. How do you get that information now into the site in a structured way? There's several solutions there right now out of the box. You could deploy artifacts like a list by using an app or an add-in, as we call them now. Does that make sense? You could almost think of an add-in as a feature. You install the add-in in the site, you click on the add-in, it actually installs artifacts into a site, like it creates lists, or it adds a page, or adds a web part to a page. This is a possible scenario, but it requires that you add the add-in to every site. You could write a console application. If you're a developer, open Visual Studio, build a console application, use the CSOM API to create a list, add a page, etc. You could write a PowerShell script. If you want, you can write complete CSOM code in PowerShell. I'm not sure if you should, but you can, no problem at all. You could consider a Azure Web Job or a Timer job or something, or a scheduled task that at certain times pushes out design to a site that you want to deploy. Several ways of doing that. Now, if you're, how many people are developers here? Ah, wonderful.
There we go.
All those developers out of there, those that work with Office 365, how many of you have been thinking about building an engine to provision stuff declaratively? Quite some. So we thought in the PnP project, we thought the same. We were like, okay, maybe we should build an engine and ask the community to come back with feedback and make it a good engine that everyone likes and solves most of the problems. So this is the provisioning engine from PnP, open source. And what we do is, out of the box, we support ONetXML. XML, not ONetXML. Everyone hates that file. Admit it, it's a horrendous file. You don't?
No, we just mimicked it.
Okay, right. Yeah, so what we did is we made an XML structure that is pretty similar to the ONetXML for the sole reason that you can actually copy items out of that file into our XML format. But if you don't like XML, say you want to support JSON, the engine supports different formatters, as we call it, so you can actually go and build your own code that transforms JSON into the internal format that we use internally in the engine.
While we're doing that, Erwin, I just want to make sure that the PnP engine means Office 365 Patterns and Practices engine. Correct. So we use a PnP as the identifier for the engine, because Office 365 Developer Patterns and Practices is a really long title.
Right, yeah.
PnP.
So the thing with the engine is that we support both applying a template, but we also support extracting a template. Have you ever tried to do save-site as template in SharePoint? Take the WSP file that you get, open it in Visual Studio, have a look at it, and start to run away crying. Yeah. And then you probably also know the guidance there is that never, ever apply that WSP file as is to an existing site collection, because it's the perfect way to make your site collection stop working. So don't take that WSP file. We actually support round-trip scenarios with our engine. So you can go to a site, say, extract the templates from the site, and apply it to another site, and the site will be a copy. It is open source. You can all join in, help us make it better. You can have a look at how we do things. There's no magic behind the scenes. This is what the template looks like in a high-level overview. XML, out of the box there, we support security. We allow you to deploy or add site collection administrators. We allow you to add people to the owners group, the members group, the visitors group. We allow you to add site collection, site fields or site columns. We allow you to create declaratively taxonomy fields. There's no way, you don't have to write an event receiver on a feature. You can deploy taxonomy fields fully declaratively. You can deploy lists. You can deploy taxonomy. You can create term groups, term sets, terms, subterms. You set the values of the language labels, etc. All there. Deploy files, pages, wiki pages, and the composed look. Now, let me demo that.
That's a wrong screen.
That's the wrong
again.
button?
We just can't get the number right.
Okay.
There we go.
We have to learn that one.
Exactly. So what I'm using here is PowerShell. In the PnP, the Patterns and Practice project, we have a PowerShell module that we give away, you can use. And I'm using the PowerShell module here to extract and apply a template.
Can you Erwin, adjust the font size? Just
Font
again,
size a bit more?
for the screen. So just making sure that people in the back understands what you're doing.
Right. Better?
I would actually put it slightly even bigger.
Even bigger.
For your age, or when I
pretty good.
He just has to love you.
You can get me later, my friend.
Right, I will. Okay, so let me show you the site first. So this is a blank site, standard team site, nothing in there. And I have a template prepared, and I'm going to apply that template. That template is located here on the file system, and it's called ignite.xml. So I'm going to connect to the site, and I'm used to a Swedish keyboard, so forgive me if I make typos. That last part is actually telling the commandlet to use credentials from the credential manager. That I set up the credentials in there, so I don't have to enter the username and password all the time. So now I'm connected, and I'm going to say apply the template, ignite to the site. There we go. And it parsed the XML file, and actually behind the scenes, it deserialized the XML file to an object, and the engine that is written in C# will parse all the elements in the object and deploy the artifacts to the site. It will take a bit, and especially applying a composed look is a bit slow, takes a while. We'll upload the files right now. And in the meantime, if I start to refresh this page, you will see that there's already a list popping up there. It's the taxonomy demo list that popped up. Soon there will be more elements.
So essentially what we're doing is that we're now using the remote APIs, using standardized XML to provision individual elements live within the Office 365. Yes. The Connect XML is a server-side operation or web template in a sandbox solution. But now this is a community-driven standardized XML and schema, which we can use and the engine to actually provision templated sites. And there we go.
There we go. So site is done, compose look applied. There is a list here. If I click on the list, you see there is a special field there, it's a taxonomy field. If I click on the new item to create a new item in that list, click on the taxonomy. And these terms were deployed by the template. And so I changed the sort order. So what I'm going to do right now is I go to the site. I'm going to add an app. Will they replace this too with add-in?
That's a good question. Yeah. Add an app or add an add-in. We'll see.
Is a list an add-in? And I'm going to create a custom list. Can someone mention a word? Random word? Sorry? Erwin. That's a pretty random word, yeah. Okay, so I'm creating a list called Erwin. Go to the list, and just for the sake of it, I'm adding a column there. Create a column. I'm going to do date time. Say birthday. So I have a custom list now in the site called Erwin. There it is. So back to PowerShell, and I say get SPO provisioning temp, not probably back template, and output that information to a file called pnp.xml. Now we have a couple of options there. I can actually say persist composed look files. What it will do is will actually take the files that make up the composed look, like the background image and the site logo and that kind of stuff, and will download that to the file system. But I have them already on my machine because they were part of the Ignite XML, so I don't have to specify that. It connects to the site and extracts a template from the site with all the information in there that I just added, the new list, and etc., etc. So in the meantime, I'm going to show you while this is running, navigating to another site I have called Ignite 2. There we go, same team site, blank team site. Template is done. Let's see if it's there. There's the PNP XML. Connecting to the other site. I have a script ready there to connect to the other site. Apply SPO provisioning template.
And just to be clear, while Erwin is doing that, this is now the PowerShell side of the engine, but the engine works also using code. So
Yeah.
it's just as well, it could be a console application, provider-hosted application, web chat, whatever. It's actually the PowerShell is taking advantage of that remote APIs and the packaging, what has been done.
Right. So there's, yeah, exactly what you say. You're not.
The question was only for SharePoint Online. This works also for on-premises. We have been testing the engine more towards SharePoint Online because the remote provisioning is more demanded on SharePoint Online, but it should be working in on-premises. We've been testing that in on-premises, and it's fine as well. While we're waiting that to come, one more question. Can we take a custom list templates while we're actually doing that? The answer is unfortunately no. If it's a custom list definition, it cannot actually extract that schema XML outside of the site. So it doesn't actually do that. It actually defines that XML or the list instance in a different way, but not custom list definitions. But I'll let Erwin do the continue.
So it's done applying the template, and we're going to reload the site, and if everything went okay, there we go. There's my taxonomy demo list. That's my Erwin list. So we did a full round trip. And this opens all kinds of interesting possibilities. And one of them is just actually right now the template is an XML file. What about using a site as a template? So if you create an engine, you create a provisioning application, like an app that you host somewhere in your environment, where say people can go to and say, hey, I want a new site collection, and this is the name, that's the URL, and create it, and you pick a template. That template is actually not an existing template, it's not an XML file or whatever. It's actually the code going out to that site, extracting the template from the site, and applying it to the new site, and then discarding the template in memory, just going with it. So your template becomes a site. If you want to add something to the template, you modify the site.
Using browser, which is the key point.
Yeah.
Good. I think we need to open up for the panel discussion. So Bob, what's your think about this one?
I'm really excited about this. I mean, just a couple of things to add on. I love what you showed. Think about for a minute how easy it is with the way that you handle sites, because now you can let business users create this site and extract it, and then you can put it through your ALM process. You can put it into development and run it through a staging and put it into production. Think about how many times, every time you go to a new version of SharePoint on-prem, they change it and you can't use the site templates. Every time it has broken. Have they ever broken the APIs? Not really. So by using the APIs, you now have a solution that will span different versions of SharePoint. I think this is better. Not only, and plus it works in hybrid scenarios. So not only is this better than what was built into the product, and I congratulate you guys for creating it, but it actually is better on-prem because it's going to help you with that upgrade scenario.
Yeah, I think, as we look at this in more detail, and I'm sort of, as somebody that's not been involved in the effort to create it, but I'm likely to be a big consumer of this, I'm interested to know if there's any edge cases or boundaries, things that it doesn't support. But as we get more into that, I can't help but think that this is probably the biggest thing that's come to the app model and remote code since it, it became popular. So one of the key things that came from my team of 20 devs is, all right, I can work out the CSOM code to do all this remote provisioning, and I can find these samples, but it's taking me way longer than when I was just doing things with feature XML. All my guys, they know that feature XML so well, and they've already got so many samples that they can pull out of their back pocket. And, to replicate that provisioning stuff in code was taking a lot of time. Yep. So it's this thing now that, I have to say, sort of mitigates a lot of my arguments and things that I didn't like about the remote code model. And I think it's hugely important. Hey, so I have got a question about the lady's question there. So the question was, if I have a custom list template, can it do something with that? So my follow-on question is, let's say I have a list created from a custom list template in some site. Will my list get carried over into the template and the new site?
I can answer that. So what will happen within the engine would actually pull that list and list information down. The list type would be an unknown number. But what you can do, because it's an object model, you can actually within the code or within the PowerShell, you can go and update that list ID to be then out-of-the-box list ID. Even though it has the custom views and even though it has the custom columns, and then it would provision that to the target site, and that would actually be exactly like the source site, but it would be then an out-of-the-box list by heart, even though it has the right views. Right. And that's actually a brilliant point, actually, an awesome discussion point.
And the key point there is you would have to go back once you leverage our tool to actually extract those site elements. You would have to go back in in order to deploy that. And actually that is what we actually recommend instead of using list templates, is to actually leverage out-of-box
One of the
templates.
questions I also hear is every now and then is, does this work with published sites? Yes.
Yeah. So just to be clear on that scenario, that would give me the list with its custom views, with its custom columns, with its custom content types. And what I've been able to do is, I guess, almost get it off a custom list template into something that's now a generic list that I can sort of truly take forward.
Yeah.
All right, well, yeah, that's cool.
Cool, yeah.
Good. Moving on another topic. We know that we wanted to have 4 hot topics today. So we've gone through the branding, we've gone through the site provisioning. Hopefully the engine was awesome. We're super proud of the engine. And please contribute back, give feedback, and test the engine. We're highly committed. It's an open source, community-driven program. And we're really interested on your feedback on that one.
One thing I wanted to add, if you want to see more of the engine, at the Microsoft stand in the Office 365 area, we have a booth there. So you can come over and we'll gladly demo it to you.
And yeah, where do you get it?
So the question is that where do we actually get the engine? The engine itself is in GitHub. It's a GitHub, if you do aka MS Office Dev PNP, Office Dev Patterns and Practices PNP, you'll land to our landing page in dev.office.com. From there you can actually see the guidance, there's examples, there's actually a site provisioning video even, which is showing and explaining how to take advantage of the engine and where you can get it. It is a Nuget, I'm behind on a Nuget package, not a Nugget package, I can't get it right. I was Nuggets, McNuggets. But you can download that Visual Studio project directly from the Nuget gallery, and then you're able to take advantage of that one. But let's continue on the. Okay. We're in a tight schedule. Like said, these guys will be the whole week standing in the PNP booth by the Office 365 dev signs. So go there, ask questions. We can repeat any demos anytime.
So I'm going to talk.
One question, and that's the only question what we do, but it's a good question. So will it actually override any of the existing lists when it's actually applying that on the existing side? The answer is it's going to recognize that the list is there, and then it's going to ignore that. We're looking into having on a how details level it should be actually checking that. It might be that it's checking, okay, list is there. What about views? Are all the views already applied? And if one of the views are missing, it's going to apply that. So it's all about delta comparison. So we're able to apply those templates on top of the existing site, which is excellent. But I'll let Bob on the following topic.
So a little bit of a shifting of gears. We'll have some time at the end, I think, to open it up to all kinds of questions. I get the job of talking about the future of sandbox solutions, which is kind of a tough topic, perhaps. I want to just start by, and I'm actually going to offer an alternative to sandbox solutions as well. So let me just review quickly what sandbox solutions are about. These were introduced in SharePoint 2010. As a way of allowing you to do multi-tenant customizations to SharePoint, because before that we had farm solutions. There really were 2 parts, or are 2 parts to sandbox solutions. One is in every site collection you have a solutions gallery, and inside of there you can use the feature framework, which we already know is kind of like a bad word around here these days, because it's quirky. And inside of there, you can set up web templates, lists, libraries, site columns, all kinds of things like that that are declarative. There was also a user code service that would run your code, shown in purple here, that's untrusted code and sort of protect the rest of the server from that code. When SharePoint 2013 came out, Microsoft announced that sandbox solutions were deprecated. I was a little shocked because and hopefully I'll get invited back after I say some of these things. But I was a little shocked because Microsoft had just put out the Design Manager, which depended on sandbox solutions, and here they are deprecating them at the same moment. So this was a little bit confusing. This was later clarified that they said that it's really the user code, the ability to run your code inside of that special sandbox process that was deprecated, and the rest of it still remains supported. So if you're expecting a big news flash today, this is actually not news. This is the same as it was. Let me just kind of do the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? I mean, sandbox solutions solve a problem. They allow you to customize SharePoint without a farm solution, and they're multi-tenant friendly. However, the one thing I noticed is that the server-side API that they allowed in that little sandbox process was so limited that a lot of people just flipped right back to the farm solution 10 minutes later. And then they didn't get that anyway. The provisioned content is brittle. That's something that the Patterns and Practices group has made evident, which is that if you delete the, if you deactivate that solution from the solution gallery, the lists can break, different things can break. Versioning is a little bit of a black art. If you upgrade them and you've got some data already in play, already in the list, and you want to add to the, a new column or something, weird things can happen. There's no central way to manage them. By putting the solution gallery in the site collection, they solved an administrative problem, which was allowing a site collection admin to do it, but they also created a distribution problem of the fact that there's lots of these site collections that need to be updated. And then there was also some scalability problems with the user code service not spinning up very quickly, and that's one of the reasons it was deprecated. So basically, it all still works. It's all still supported. In SharePoint 2016, the user code, the solution gallery will still work. So nothing's going away. No reason to panic. The app model is not dead. Nothing is dead. Nobody's dying today. Everything's okay. But I want to convince you to avoid using sandbox solutions because it's just really not the most strong approach. Using the APIs is much, much better. So what I want to do is offer up an alternative. The most common scenario that I saw around sandbox solutions was writing web parts. And this concept is actually not new either, although Vesa kind of coined a cool term for it, which is app script parts. You see these things all over the web, right? Sometimes they're called widgets, web widgets, plugins, embeds, maybe even add-ins. I don't know. But it's really just a clever piece of HTML and JavaScript that acts like a web part. So why not use that same pattern inside of SharePoint? I have to say that I have seen people struggle with the app model or the add-in model. And sometimes it's worth the extra work and figuring out how to work inside of an iframe and things like that. And sometimes it's not really necessary. So that's why I want to offer up this other alternative. Here's my kind of consumer reports slide on app parts, which are the add-ins, versus the app script parts. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but the fact that the app parts run in an isolated environment is important because you're maybe getting this app from the store. It was written by you don't know who, and so you want to just make extra sure that you're protected from that app code. So you've got to go through this whole cross-domain thing, and you've got to go through, you've got to live inside of an iframe. If you're in an enterprise and you've got your own developers and you trust it or you've reviewed the code, then maybe you don't need some of that extra plumbing. And so using an app script part allows you to run right on the page and interact with the page in any way that you would want. It allows you to interact with the host web directly. So what I want to do is show you a quick demo, and I'm going to show you one application that can be deployed in 3 different ways. First, it will be a SharePoint hosted app. Then I will show you how to deploy it using drag and drop deployment, meaning that you just drop some files into place. And then the third way that I'll show you is a centrally managed scenario where you can actually have one copy of the app centrally so that you can easily upgrade it across hundreds of sites. So here's my example. It's a little micro survey, and this is something that you've probably seen around. And so the best part of Ignite, exhibits, probably the parties. Yep, everybody agrees that it's the parties. So this is the web part, and it's actually living right on the page. Now, if I click into the app, I'm sorry, it's not here. It's a SharePoint hosted app. If I click into the app, I get this screen inside of the app. And what you'll see is the web part is shown there again, but over to the left is this SharePoint content check. And what it's doing is in JavaScript, it's going and making sure that the lists and the columns that it needs to do its job are provisioned. And if it finds them, it just says, yep, I found them, we're okay. If it doesn't find them, it will provision them. So what this does is it handles versioning very, very simply. I don't have to do anything special. It's always going to kind of repair itself if something is missing. Now watch what I can do with this. Actually, let me go and show it to you in Visual Studio, and you'll see here that all of the files that make this work are actually in a single folder inside of the app. So it's a little bit of a different structure than you would typically find in a SharePoint hosted app. Now I put Angular right in there, so this is an AngularJS application. I could use the new CDN manager, which is very cool. I encourage you to look at that, and it would work the same way to provision that. Let me just go in and open these files, or take a look at these files in regular old Windows Explorer. And then here I have a brand new collab site. And proven by the fact that I removed the remove this thing, right? So let me go ahead, and now I'm going to do the unpopular thing. Everybody already panned this. And go into the site assets. And now, in order to really infuriate everybody, I'm going to create a folder, right? Because everybody knows folders are evil as well, right? That's not really true. There's times for a folder, but we can have that discussion later. And then I'll go ahead and drag all those files into place. I'm really just trying to make a point here. But you know, this is also something that an end user could do, because maybe the end user doesn't have the PowerShell capabilities and all that kind of stuff. Click on the default page, bang, there's the app. It created the list, it created the columns. It's inviting me to enter a question. I can go ahead and type in a simple question. Let's see, we'll do a favorite color. And I'm kind of an RGB kind of guy. So we'll go ahead and bang, there it is, it's working. In the interest of time, I'm not going to show you the web part, but I could actually take a content editor web part, point it to one of my HTML files, and I would get that same experience, except I'd be running directly on the page. So let me just show you a couple of code snippets. I'm going to go really quickly, but this will all be, I need to actually submit this to PNP, so hopefully this will be up in the Patterns and Practices library. This is the way that in the RESTful API from JavaScript, I can check to see if a list exists. And then if it doesn't exist for some reason, this is the code that creates it. So it's not a lot of code, really. It's actually smaller than the XML that would have created it the old way. And much more flexible. And then here's this big chain of promises that are used to actually create the first, or ensure that the first list is there, and then the column, and then the view, and then the next list, etc. So it's actually pretty simple stuff. Now, what if I wanted to handle this in a central way? And I actually showed this to Vesa, and he actually challenged me. And he said, I like your demo, but what if I wanted to update this on 100 sites? I'd have to go around to 100 places and update it. He was right. So there's many, many ways to do this. We could host these files in Azure. We could host them in a provider-hosted app. We could put them almost anywhere. I decided I like to keep things simple. So I just put it in an IIS site. So if you look here, I actually have a site called install. And inside of that, I have those same files. There's a survey app folder. Here's the same files that were there before.
So you're running in on-premises now, right? So
this is running on premises, yes. But again, I could put, actually, I tried this with the SharePoint side in Office 365 and the IIS site on premises, or I could have the files in an Azure PaaS site. It really doesn't matter, right? So it's just a pattern. And I think that's one of the big things. Obviously, they call it patterns and practices for a reason. Just take away the patterns. You don't have to follow a rigid set of rules. So I have another brand new site. I'm going to go ahead and remove the remove this thingy. That sounds like that's a command, right? You're supposed to remove it. And now you'll notice that it's just a site, okay? Now I'm going to run a little PowerShell script, and I thank the Patterns and Practices folks again for giving me the commands that I used to write this. This time I did not pre-populate the credentials, so I'll go ahead and enter my credentials. Again, this works on-prem or in Office 365, and if you look at the output, you'll notice that it deployed 2 files, These are actually just the default.aspx and the webpart.html are files that bootstrap the Angular app. And it also provisioned the lists, because I want to make sure that an administrator was there who could create those lists. All right, now just go back to the website. There's the web part. It even put the web part on the page. And now I can come in here and enter. I'll just make it a super simple little question. And bang, there it is. It works. I can answer it. What if I want to update it? All I have to do is go back to those files, and I'll just do a very gratuitous change. I'm going to change the button color of the little push buttons. And so let's see, green is probably a good color. Not green, green. And refresh, and bang, there it is throughout my enterprise. Very, very simple. All right, pretty cool? Thank you. So a couple of quick code snippets. I had to do some little tricks with caching and CORS headers in my site. So this, again, will be part of the code sample. Here's the install script. You can see that they've given us a really great and simple PowerShell vocabulary for going in and creating provisioning the files. I'm just looping through all the files and putting them out there. Here I'm actually going to go ahead and the next version was going to hopefully work with a minimal download strategy, but for now I'm disabling that. That's another topic. And I'm going to go ahead and add, I didn't show it, but I added a link to the site settings so that I could get to that site control page. Added the web part to the page, one line of code. Very, very simple, and added the list. So in summary, the future of sandbox solutions is in doubt. Microsoft seems to have a death wish for sandbox solutions. They have all kinds of little quirks and problems. Do you really want to use them? Here's another alternative.
Thanks, Rob. Let's Chris to go and set the microphone, and we'll have a discussion about this one. So this is actually a really good example of maybe the justification why we call them now add-ins, because that's an actually really good terminology for that kind of a thing. And that's absolutely valid approach. We're just taking advantage of the web technologies just by embedding the JavaScript in a different way. When I think of it, it's same as Yammer embedding and so on. Erwin, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was thinking about when Vesa says like you have to update 100 sites. If you use the PowerShell library, that's pretty trivial, actually. You just create a loop, you work through your sites, and you run the script time after time. So it's pretty simple. Yeah.
See, I have to say that there's some bits of it that, I guess I'm still not fully on board with, this idea of just dropping sandbox solutions completely. Because I think that some of these scenarios where, okay, if you don't have hundreds or thousands of site collections, if you've just got that one intranet that's one site collection, and it needs to be highly branded, and it needs certain things provisioned to it, for me, it's still really quick for me to put a no-code sandbox solution together that deploys the branding, that puts the lists and the content types in there. And okay, it's challenging if I've got hundreds of those site collections, but when there is only one, it still feels a shame to have to use remote code sometimes. So, it's,
and you know what? And I'm kind of with you. Just one favor: list definitions and content types. Yeah. Those keep me up. Those give me bad headaches. Yeah. Because how do you update them? Even with the feature framework today, you have to write code for it.
Yeah.
No matter what. So, wouldn't it be best just to write the code the first time, for those?
Yeah, let me take an attempt at the solution, because this is what I've been doing with my clients, is it's a trade-off. And one thing that's happening is when I first learned about some of this, the tooling was not there. And so the code was really hard to write. It's kind of like what you were saying. Now the patterns and practices is there. So if you think about it from an economic point of view, the cost of doing remote provisioning is dropping. And is going to continue to drop. The cost of the sandbox solution is there because it's brittle and it has these other quirks. So at some point, and it's going to be different for every situation and every customer, those two lines are going to intersect and you're going to switch. And so really, as architects, we all have to have our business hats on at the same time as our technical hats. And this is one of those cases. You have to make a smart decision based on where you're at right now and what the relative cost and benefit is of each approach.
All right.
Let's move to the following section. So Chris can talk about the evolution of the app model or evolving the app model. What does the Office 365 APIs actually then means? And that's a pretty common question.
Yeah. All right, so we've got a whole room full of developers from that previous hands up. I'm kind of interested if, put your hand up if you've done some kind of app model development and you are a developer. All right, so that's quite a few. Put your hand up if you've done some development with the new Office 365 app model APIs. Anybody done any of that? All right, so we've got a handful, but it sounds like this is new stuff to quite a lot of people. So let's talk about the kind of things that are in there. All right, so let's think about what an Office 365 is. What is this change that is being made to the app model? The app model's been there for 2 years now. What are we seeing with the Office 365 apps? And the way I think about this is really that SharePoint app model that we're used to for the past 2 years actually had some things about it that were suboptimal, to say the least. And the kind of things that we used to hear a lot of feedback from is where clients would say, why do I have to go into a SharePoint site to access this app? Why can I not go to it directly in my browser? Why is it that I have to go via the SharePoint site? And we'd have sort of the implementation team saying, hang on, so I have to work out a way of installing this to all 100 team sites that we have. Well, that's a pain. And, really, apps were never really truly standalone, and that became a problem. If the app was really doing something connected tightly to the SharePoint site, then fine, it made sense. But when it wasn't, and a user just needed to get there, it was always a shame to have to go via that site contents page. Other trade-offs with the app model were, it wasn't really that easy to develop. I think the message 2 years ago was, hey, you only need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and now you can develop for SharePoint. No offense, guys, but I never really swallowed that message. I always said that, really, that's nonsense, because you need to know SharePoint and its building blocks. You need to know the authentication model around apps. You need to know how the app relates to SharePoint, and you need to know SharePoint hosted, provider hosted, and you need to now know the remote APIs, as well as the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I never really swallowed that message, to be honest. They were hard to build, right? And that's maybe why not so many people put their hands up. So Office 365 APIs are trying to make app development simpler for the common things that you might need to do with SharePoint and Office 365. And it's a simpler API service and simpler authentication and so on. So the kind of things that we can really do, basically build an app that is standalone, doesn't need to be installed to a SharePoint site. If a user hasn't authenticated, they get forced through an authentication dialog. And these apps are globally accessible. They plug into the app launcher and the My Apps page. This is kind of the global navigation across the Office 365 suite. So they start to make sense in the global Office 365 experience. I think they're simpler to build. You don't need the sort of like the deep SharePoint knowledge, or if you had to do something with mail or calendars, you don't need to know Exchange web services and that kind of development. So I think people that are just general web developers that need a bit of Office 365, this model is a whole heap simpler. And, it's Office 365 only, but it'll be interesting to see if there's any convergence with on-premises in this API and model. We'll have to wait and see. But really, Microsoft are trying to make it simpler to develop these kind of apps, okay? And there's libraries for all of the platforms that you might want to be on, whether it's .NET or JavaScript, but also iOS and Android, okay? So, really trying to lower the barriers between what's out there and so on. Now, the kind of capabilities that come with these APIs are really around core Office 365 data that relates to the user, so whether it's their mail, their calendar, their files. And if you imagine that, your boss is asking you to build a meetings app or some kind of expense tracking app, and really what it does is perhaps store some data in lists or work with contacts or calendar items and events. Maybe it can send email, maybe it needs to store files. Actually, you're kind of covered pretty well with this API. And it's going to handle a lot of these things for you without too much effort. And really, I think the main message is that you can do these things without needing to be like a deep SharePoint developer. So let's take a look at this quickly, and we'll try and sort of zip through this quickly. So really what we're saying is an Office 365 app, it can basically integrate with the app launcher. So the app launcher is the global navigation. That's how I see the apps that I use most frequently. Behind that is the My Apps page. That's really where most of my apps appear, and each individual user can decide which ones to pin to the app launcher. So that's a user-led thing right now. Each app will basically appear here, and that's how the user will pin it. So a user can now access it with one click less. And really, when they go into an Office 365 app, what's happening is they are taken outside of SharePoint. So that bit is very much consistent with the SharePoint add-in model. This is something that exists somewhere else. I get basically redirected out of SharePoint into the app. And this is a good sample app if ever you're looking for something to sort of get started. It basically is some sample code that you can get from GitHub. It exercises all of the APIs like mails, files, calendar, and so on. And it's a really good sample for you to see and start working with the app. So it's basically an app that can read and write to all of those surfaces. So it's a good sample. Now, I think what we'll do, because I think we're probably running a little bit late, is I think that you've probably seen various samples like this throughout the conference. And if you haven't, really just go to GitHub. They're really easy to bring down to your machine, and you can sort of play with them. Really, I think you probably don't need to sort of see too much on this, but I think what is valuable is probably your questions and things that are on your mind from all of the 4 topics that we'll talk about. So instead of sort of seeing the full video end to end and really thinking too deeply about Office 365 APIs, I think let's go forward and let's think about questions. Before we do, I think I'd just like to give you my sort of takeaway messages on Office 365 apps. And maybe the kind of thing that you're thinking about is, all right, we had the app model for 2 years, and now we've got this kind of new flavor, but how does it fit in? I sort of initially saw it as a little change in direction from Microsoft. And, they're making a big change to the app model, and it's Microsoft doing their typical thing of changing things. I think now I see it more and more of just an extension of the app model that is a bit more targeted towards Office 365, a bit more easier to pick up. And the thing that really made it sort of me see it as not a big change in direction is something that we haven't talked about. And that's, what if those APIs don't cover me for what I need to do? Well, the answer is you can now use the same authentication token from Office 365, and you can use it with SharePoint CSOM and SharePoint REST. So when you need to store something as a list item and the Files API doesn't help you, you can use that same authentication token and just mix in a bit of CSOM code. So maybe you've got 80% of the code using Office 365 APIs, but 20% using ye olde CSOM, right? And it's that really means that it's kind of one app model now to me. And I think when that change came in, I now see it as just the remote code model. So these APIs, great if you need to do things across the services like mail, calendar, and files. So that's kind of SharePoint Online and Exchange Online underneath. And this model will become wider and deeper. So you'll do more development with this flavor, I think. So just bear in mind some of the differences between this sort of area of the model compared to SharePoint add-ins, but I think it's a really valuable extension of the model. All right, so I think with that in mind, I think we're probably opening up for questions.
Let's open up that for the questions, indeed. Thank Chris. Good presentation related on SharePoint, Office 365 APIs. From a timing perspective, we still have 10 minutes for questions, so if you don't mind walking on the microphones, and so we get it actually recorded as well.
Sure. So I'm really excited about the new APIs and everything that really helps some of my Angular team members, really get into some SharePoint development. That's cool and all, especially if I'm making apps. But so many of my requests are, hey, I really like this feature in SharePoint, but we just need it to be tweaked to do this, or I need this special column, or I need to do something. It's really extending what SharePoint provides us and not building an app. And I'm really frustrated with the app model and that experience, because I feel like that the SharePoint team gets to use nice server-side code to do cool stuff, and they're not limited to the same API that I'm limited on. I mean, an example was I needed to extend the lookup column, do something like that. If I use the JS link, I'm doing potentially hundreds of thousands of JavaScript calls, AJAX calls on the page, whereas if I extended from a SP lookup, then it does the inner joins on SQL for me, and I get the performance that I need. And I'm looking to hopefully in the future maybe have some parity between what the SharePoint team is using and what I am allowed to use.
Good comment and excellent question. So obviously when we are in Office 365 world, we can't allow server-side code. And so that's kind of a taken. Right. Even in on-premises, you're fully supported to do full source code. So if you want to make that decision and want to do that, that's absolutely fine. You're not breaking any rules.
But I'm again, a second-class citizen being on-prem.
In on-prem, you have access on all the same capabilities as in the product group if you use the farm solution option. But right. You're absolutely right. We are promoting the app model. We are trying to make sure that it's disconnected. It's loosely coupled implementation. And I do get the feedback as well related on having a second level of citizen. And
just to throw in, I mean, there's a lot of questions, so I'd like to sidebar with you.
That's fine.
But you can do a lot with the client object model. Okay, so I've done a lot of work with lookup columns. I've done the joins. I think personally, I'd like to see Microsoft document it all because I have to freaking reverse engineer it every time.
Okay.
But it is there. So.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Good. Follow-up question. Let's take that one. Yeah.
So we do a lot of work with event handlers and feature receivers. The thing that came to mind when you were doing branding is we let people create their own subsites, and I want to make sure that as soon as that subsite is created, we fire off all the branding. As we move into this sort of client-side remote code, where do I go with that kind of solution?
I'll let Frank answer to that one, so I know that he can get this right.
Yeah. You have taught me well, Master. So one of the things that we want to do, right, with that specific, I would not leverage a remote event receiver in that case because you can't really run those in long-running operations, right? You can actually signify that it actually was created and then drop a message into an Azure queue for back-end processing. That is one pattern that you can specifically leverage. We also have samples out in P&P, and if you forget the link, we'll be upstairs tomorrow, and I can actually show you a demo of the site provisioning. So what we do is we leverage our friend JavaScript embedding to override that link. It makes it look like the sub-site creation page, but it's really our app, and we actually can leverage the P&P engine to actually apply some of those customizations. Okay. Right. So those are just a few things that you can go.
Awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. Actually, is there any follow-up to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Related to the templating engine, how does it handle content types that are pushed from the content type hub?
What about content type hubs within the P&P engine is the question.
Frank seems to jump. Okay.
All right. This one I know. All right. So what you do is you just don't define those content types. So the first thing that you have to do, right, is when you provision a site, that site will actually have those content types there. So you don't have to worry about that. So you would exclude those items from the XML definition, right, in the P&P.
Okay. Yep. So then if I would use the ability to generate that template, I would need to go afterwards and modify the XML and take them out.
So, and that is the second point that you have to be cautious about is because those content types, when you do an export of that, you're going to have those fields and those IDs in there. And if you try to apply to another site, it won't work. But what's going to happen, though, is the engine will bypass that and it would be ignored.
So let's clarify slightly on that one. So what would happen is that whenever you create the out-of-the-box theme site, the content types would be coming down from the content type hub to that out-of-the-box theme site. After that point, you run the engine, because you always start with an out-of-the-box theme site. So therefore, those content types would be already there. Even though they would be in your XML, the engine would read the XML. Okay, I need to create a content type. Oh, it exists. I'm going to jump over that one and move and follow on. Okay. So it has the delta thinking implemented in it.
Okay. And I have another quick question. You had shown previously that we are going to be able to register an app in AD on premises. Is that in SharePoint? In Windows Server 2016, or?
So in the previous session, which I was running in here, we were talking about the fact that you're able to get a Azure access to or register your SharePoint app to the Azure AD, and you get an access token against the Azure AD as well. That's going to be part of SharePoint 2016. SharePoint Server 2016. That's not going to be in 2013. Okay. So, but if you're running the latest SharePoint 2016, you can do then hybrid scenarios towards cloud using the Azure AD access token. In a scenario, for example, that you have an on-premises app, you want to access OneDrive for Business files within the cloud, you're able to use that access token to get your hands on those.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, two quick questions, please. Does the PNP engine handle design manager packages?
I'll let Erwin answer on this one.
No. Okay. Told you it was quick. The second one is, Bob, I saw in your some of your sample code a lot of SPO commands that are not, in my memory, part of the original set of.
Correct.
They are the PowerShell. That's the PowerShell module that you can download from the PNP.
Okay, so
yeah, we have like close to 100
SPO naming conventions.
Additional commandlets.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I have two questions for you guys. The first one deals with your favorite topic being list definitions and content types. So within the app web, does the same rules also apply?
Yes.
No.
Well, Mike, so it's good.
Sorry. Sorry. Frank concentrates now. That's cool. So when you're doing an app web, you can absolutely take a SharePoint hosted app. You can absolutely take advantage of the Visual Studio tooling and the Visual Studio tooling related on list definitions, because those list definitions will be isolated within the app web level. So therefore, it doesn't actually have an impact on anywhere outside of the app web. And there you can absolutely use still the feature framework. It's more about when we start provisioning modifications on a host web and actual SharePoint sites. If you want to really build a SharePoint app within the store, you will be still taking advantage of Visual Studio tooling, create the SharePoint hosted app project, and you can take advantage of the list definitions and all of that there. So.
Okay, good. Then I didn't do it horribly wrong. And I'm sorry, I can't remember. My second question is I can't remember what your name is. I'm horribly sorry. Bob, you said you used Angular, but you should go check something out, and I missed what the something was.
The CDN manager is another patterns and practices thing that Scott Hillier and some other folks worked on, and that allows you to. It's an app that uses the app model to pull files from a CDN in to your sites and allow you to centrally manage them. So just look for CDN manager, and it's sort of, and just I think the CDN manager shows a really cool pattern, which is using the app model as provisioning code, or as a way to go in and modify a site instead of being the thing that the end user sees. It's the thing that sets things up so the end user can do something later, and that is a big paradigm shift that just opens up a whole lot of stuff. So anyway, I had to throw that in too.
Thanks.
Next on that side? Yeah. I think he was next. Okay, sorry. On the back.
I had Mike at the back.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Me? Question for Bob. I've also done some of your sort of web part script apps using Backbone instead of Angular, but
yep.
And I can get them to work with MDS as long as I'm shimming them through a JS link. But it sounded like you were on a track to get it to work when you're inserting it directly through a web part. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I haven't cracked that nut yet.
What your plan is?
But I think it was it you, Vesa, who told me that you know how to fix that? I don't know. I'm totally putting him on the spot. I'm going to try to do it, and if you follow my blog, I'm going to actually document what I showed today and put that out there. And it's sort of an adventure that I'm on to try to make it work from the web part surface, because the MDS normally will shut that stuff off.
And it's not a question of using the typical way, so you have to register something with MDS, and that's what's making it compliant. It's not the same techniques that you need to use there.
That's what I'm having to do through the
Right.
JS
Yeah,
link.
yeah. So there are some places where this is well documented. There's a couple of probably patterns and practices. Yeah, those samples would do a good job of.
The CDN manager documentation specifically, which is an example of this pattern, specifically says it doesn't work in a content editor web part. It does work in JS Link. So I had that same, and it's right in the patterns and practices wiki. So that's why I was confused about it as well.
Okay, fair enough.
So I'll follow your blog.
Okay, I'll keep on, and we can keep. That's the nice thing, right? Sharing is caring. To steal your phrase, I mean, we're in this together. We're trying to make a better way. So we can all contribute to this.
All right, question over there, maybe.
So does the provisioning engine take into account like dependencies? So like if you're deploying a lookup column, does it deploy the list? And if you're doing sub-content types, does it know how to which order to deploy stuff in?
No, it doesn't it doesn't include the list, but the list is part of the site, so it'll be included in the XML anyway, or in the template.
Okay, so it won't. So if you have a lookup column, it won't work.
No, lookup columns work.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So
and because the lookup column is like looking up to a list in the site, that list will be in your template anyway.
So you are doing dependency checking to see which order stuff needs to be deployed in.
Well, actually, it's the other way around. When we apply it, we do that. So when we apply the template, it's a bit of a trick we do. It's a bit of a nasty trick, but what we do is that we strip the list attribute from the field. Then we apply the field. And then later on, if the fields will be created first, then the list will be created. Then we work our way again through all the fields that you create in the template or have in the template, and then we add the list attribute again.
Because I've tried to deploy the fields first, and if you can't deploy the lookup field before
if the list is not present.
before you deploy the list.
Yeah, correct. But that's been taken care of by the engine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the provisioning engine. This is the first that I've heard of that, and so I think we had spoken a little bit earlier about I've overridden the SP Web provisioning provider class in on-premise solutions, and my question is more along the lines of is this a similar approach, and is it going to be as expansible as that?
So the requirements, right, for this provisioning engine on-prem is obviously you need Service Pack 1, April CU is the requirement. I feel that this is probably the best pattern to actually implement your type of customizations to your site collections instead of writing those custom providers. We're still testing various things on premises, so if there is a bug that you find, please feel free to post, because we're actually testing this right now for our dedicated customers. This is actually the preferred pattern going forward with provisioning sites, and it could be either, like Vesa and others said, is a web job or a remote timer job pattern, or leveraging PowerShell. And the UX could be whatever you want. It's the engine that actually matters to apply the customizations. Hopefully I addressed your question. Basically, use this new pattern. Don't go back. Okay. No web templates.
Quick follow-up on the Frank discussion. So if you go to dev.office.com, you look for patterns and practices, you land on our landing page, which looks something like this one. There's the faces of the core team. There's latest news, latest releases. If we go to the May monthly update, you are able to follow up what happened actually in May. The latest version is out actually on Monday. And all of these are pointing then to the open source GitHub community. You're able to download the code. You're able to contribute back if needed. And there's a lot of stuff in the PNP. Now, specifically for the provisioning engine, we do already have one video available. It's just the PNP provisioning engine introduction. It is showing essentially how it works against live site. It's a provider-hosted application story. but it's getting you started on thinking what does it actually do and how is it implemented. The source code is available in the PNP. So if you really want to, if you download a GitHub, it's actually underneath the Office PNP core. This is our core component, which is increasing productivity of the developers when they get it attached or referenced in the properly hosted application. But that probably will get everybody started on things. Now, I'm being conscious about the times. We've already gone through the time, so let's actually close up the questions for today. You can come on the podium and ask the questions in here, but let's free you're more than willing to go and leave to your hotel. But feel free to come in front, and then we'll take questions in the Office 365 booth as well. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.